Texas right now. So I'm thrilled that we could be talking to you. So could you tell us a little bit about who you are and why you've decided to run for office?
My name's Erin Zwiener. I'm running for House District 45, represents 2 counties in Texas. I really felt like it was time for someone to step up to run in my district. I'm a fifth generation Texan, grew up right here in Central Texas, and I have a background in natural resource conservation, worked for nonprofits, building public-private partnerships. Then when I realized that so many of the issues I was running into in that work were related to how folks understood the policies and the science behind the issues we were dealing with, I decided to focus on writing and try to be part of bridging that communication gap. So I'm also a published children's book author. And then leading up to the election in 2016, I was getting ready to try and find an agent for a book about the history of women in the American West. And then the election happened, and I realized that as much as I love my historical women, they are dead, and there were many people alive right now who needed my work more. I dove into organizing. I've always been a very political person, but I had sort of skirted around the edges of it, and I just dove in and organized a 1,000-person demonstration to ask our Texas electors to vote for anybody not named Donald Trump, which wasn't very effective, unfortunately. But it did drive home exactly how important Texas is in national politics. No one could call the Electoral College election for Donald Trump until the Texas electors voted. We in Texas had enough votes to deny him or anyone else the presidency. And for me, what that means is once we put Texas in play nationally, all of politics has to shift around that. I want to be a part of putting it in play. About a year ago is when I started seriously considering running for this office. And it started because the incumbent really made me angry. He wouldn't post about policy. He would just post kind of feel-good photos, posing with a football helmet or him and his wife at a party. And so I started asking him where he stood on issues that were important to me. Just ask him what his stance was on this anti-immigration bill. And he responded to me asking this question a few times by insulting me and calling me a troll and eventually blocking me on Facebook just for being a constituent asking a policy question. I looked around and said, well, this guy doesn't deserve his job, and I need to support who's ever running against him. Discovered that no one had run against him since 2012, and that no one at that point was gearing up to run against him, and that maybe it was me. Maybe I was the person who needed to step up.
Yeah, I love that. I think we're hearing that a lot, and it's so fantastic, regardless of how all of the 2018 elections go. Just the idea that people are running in these districts that where no one has been running for so long, where no one has been challenging, I think is super exciting.
You know, especially here in Texas, I think we got a little worn down on losing. I'm 32, and basically my entire life, Republicans have been gaining power in Texas. But that's been shifting in the last few years, and Democrats have been making a lot of gains. That hasn't always translated into more seats, but it has always been translating into more votes. And I think we're about to see some big shifts. I joke that we have the Tinkerbell problem. We can't win until we believe, but we won't believe until we win. And I'm like, we just have to suspend our disbelief this year, act like it's possible, and work our butts off to make it so.
You know, everyone we talk to in Texas has been super passionate and super excited and seems to really believe that things can change. I think, and I know we've been hearing for a while that a blue wave is coming to Texas, but it seems like it is. It may not be the, crashing wave that people are picturing, but
Or it might be.
or it might be, and that would be fantastic.
Yeah, when I look at my district, we now have an open seat. The incumbent decided to run for Congress instead. So we have both a Republican primary and a Democratic primary, which really gives us a lot of opportunity and makes this race anyone's game in the fall. But Trump won this district by 4.5 percentage points, which is something that is totally surmountable, especially in a district with a lot of young folks who have a pretty low turnout rate. If they're excited, and I believe they are, I see that they are, That's a path to victory right there.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about turnout? What we kept hearing from people in Texas was this saying that Texas isn't a red state, it's a non-voting state. Can you talk about ways that you think you could help get more people energized to go out and vote?
Well, I think one of the first things is that we need to run as strong progressives. In Texas, there is this inclination to try and run sort of a Republican light Democrat with the thought that you will peel away votes. But as someone who grew up in a Republican family, I can tell you that Republicans, people who think of themselves as Republicans, that's an identity. It takes a lot. It takes a lot for them to not vote with their party. And if they don't vote with their party, they're more likely to go vote for a libertarian than to go vote for the Democrat. So this idea that we can peel off a bunch of these consistent Republican voters, I just don't think is based in the reality of what's happening on the ground. I think there's a few that we have a shot at, but I think most folks vote how they vote every year. The difference is the folks who don't show up to vote. And that's where we can start to close gaps in Texas. When I look at my district, the western half of my district, which is a little bit older, wealthier, whiter, folks vote consistently. We have voter turnout rates anywhere from the high 60s to the low 80s. And those areas are consistently 60% Republican. The eastern part of my district is younger, it's browner, and it's poorer. And our voter turnout rates range from the low 30s and don't get any higher than the low 60s. That's where we have the opportunity to really make a lot of difference. And a lot of those folks have never been asked for their vote. They've never been asked to show up and support a candidate. Many of them are not super engaged in local politics. They only think about presidential. And if we can go reach out to those folks and explain how important these midterm years are, say, yes, you are used to feeling like your vote doesn't count in presidential elections, but your vote counts in this local race where a few thousand folks is all the race hinges on. That's when we can start to really boost turnout. And I think we really have to make sure that we're doing things that energize young folks. One question I get asked a lot is, are you afraid to go negative? Folks really kind of want me to be on the attack against whoever is on the other side. And I will say I'm not afraid to go negative, but I think it's massively unstrategic right now to go negative because young folks are cynical about politics and they are sick of seeing nasty campaigning, regardless of who it comes from. And I think if we go negative too much, that turns into young folks going, I'm going to tune that out and go have a drink instead of going to vote. So I think we need to make sure that we are running for something, not against something. We have a lot of cynicism to cut through if we're really going to boost turnout. And we can't do that by attacking the other side. We have to do it by emphasizing who we are and why we will do good for the state and for our district.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's really valuable to have millennial candidates running. Sadly, I am not a millennial myself. I'm a little bit too old for that bracket. But I think it's so exciting to see so many millennials going out to run for office. And I think that that speaks to some of this excitement and energy that we're seeing around younger people with voting and getting engaged in politics, in some cases for the very first time.
Yeah, I have a friend I think of who I use as my example when folks ask me if millennials really are engaged this year. And this friend, I think he was 23 or 24 when the 2016 election happened. And we didn't really talk about politics at that time, me and him. But up until the election, he kept posting giant meteor 2016 memes. He was all snark about it, clearly not excited about anyone. I have no idea if he voted or not. Well, last April, he was the lead organizer for the Denver Climate March. Now he is, I believe, the digital communications director for a Democratic candidate. This is somebody who went from politics is stupid, I don't like it, I'm not going to engage in it, to working on a progressive campaign in a year and a half. That's the sort of shifts we are seeing all across the younger generation. We have realized that no one else is coming to save us, and we better roll up our sleeves and figure out how to do it ourselves.
Yeah, That's fantastic. And you're sort of at this intersection of millennials who are running for office, women who are running for office in greater numbers, and scientists and people interested in science who are running for office. So you were featured recently on the cover of Time magazine. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. It was a little wild.
Yeah, and so that was really exciting to see all of the women that they were featuring who were running for office, and that's, part of the impetus for an episode like this. But can you also talk a little bit about sort of the scientific mindset and this idea of natural conservation management and how that plays into your idea of what people should be doing in government?
What I love about having a science background and a natural resources background is that those areas aren't about ideology. What you believe doesn't matter when you're trying to do habitat enhancement work. What matters is what works. So you can't get stuck in abstract ideas. You have to use what has been tested and been shown to be effective on the ground. And that's something I think we need a lot more of at every level of government. And that's something I kind of try to talk to folks about. I mean, I am very progressive, and I try to tell folks I'm not progressive because I'm a bleeding heart liberal who can't stand to see a puppy suffer, though those things may be true. I'm a progressive because those policies have been shown to work on the ground in other states and in other countries, and so we should implement them here. And I think that attitude of, let me show you my evidence, is useful. And I think that attitude of choosing, again, what has been demonstrated to be effective, what has been demonstrated to work, over what feels good on a gut level, is going to be what we need to cut through the polarization of our current politics. I feel like the elephant in the room in every political conversation I'm going to have today is going to be the shooting in Florida yesterday.
Yeah.
And we already see people retreating to their corners. And I think the most useful conversation we can have is what would actually work? What would actually make this stop? Where have we seen effective solutions to this? What does this look like in other countries? And I think redirecting the conversation there as much as possible is how we will start to move forward and start to build some groundswell support for common sense gun laws that prevent shootings like this from happening.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And there's definitely evidence. There are studies. We know what will work. We know what could be fairly easily implemented, and we need to be moving forward. So I like this idea of sort of focusing on the evidence, and so much of politics these days seems to be so emotional, and that's clearly not a path that's working for the country.
Yeah, and I don't want to discount anyone's strong emotions about any of this. They're real. They have a place, and emotion is powerful. But I also think there are moments where someone, not everyone, has to put it aside and be coming at things from the most, I want to say pragmatic, but that doesn't feel quite the right word. Maybe rational is the right word. That at some point we have to kind of focus on the rationality aspect of it as well, particularly as a way to disarm the emotions that are preventing progress.
All right, well, we've gotten a little heavy. Let's talk about a few lighter things about you as well. You're a three-time Jeopardy champion.
Yes. Yeah, I appeared on the show back in 2012. I studied intensely to go on Jeopardy. I spent about a month doing nothing but practicing how the game worked and researching topics that were likely to come up. And it was the most intense period of study in my life until I decided to run for the Texas legislature and realized that I needed to understand how all the issues I cared about were impacted by state policy. And I'm not sure I understand all of them perfectly yet because the state government feels infinite, like you can never know enough. But I'm very glad to have that practice and that research habit right now as I try to know enough to be a great legislator for my district.
All right, so everybody, there's your key to how to run for office. Go get on Jeopardy first. I have in fact auditioned for Jeopardy. I know it's not that easy to get on. So that's great. And you've ridden a mule for how many miles did you ride your mule?
Of 1,400 miles along the Continental Divide Trail, which I'll say, as a first-time woman running for office, people are often like, how are you going to deal with the boys club and all those rude legislators in the Capitol? And we've had some media recently about exactly how toxic the culture up there can be to women. And usually what I tell them is, well, I have practice training mules, and I'm not sure